Okay, hello everybody. George C.O.C. Samuels here, the cultural animator, and I'm with Mariah Hunia, director of Kapohia. Hi, Mariah. How are you doing?
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Now, Mariah and I first met in Melbourne at the Polima Conference, which is a language and technology forum for the indigenous. And first question for you, could you just tell us a bit about your business and background?
Sure, where to begin? My business is in resource production for educational resource production. So we make books and apps and audio resources for kura Māori language schools and preschools here in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Now, of course, it's obvious to me, but maybe talk a bit about your ethnic background and sort of, the story about how you came to be.
Sure. Okay. In Aotearoa, we start off with a pepeha, which tells about who we are and where we're from. So we talk about our mountains. So my mountain is Putawaki, and my river is Rangitaiki, and my waka, my canoe. It's a bad translation, but my waka is Mātātua, and I'm from a tribe iwi called Ngāti Awa.
Nice. And I remember at the conference you had some videos of your children as well, and the passion for language. Now, yeah, what's the current situation in New Zealand, and in terms of revival for culture?
We have a very strong revival movement. Our language, like other indigenous languages in countries that have been colonised, has seen a lot of language shifts. So we went from a completely Māori-speaking monolingual country before colonisation, and then various policies and practices since then has seen language shift, move towards English, and essentially we got to a point in about the 1970s where our old people saw that there were very few people who were passing the language on to young people. So that's when the Kohanga Reo movement began, which is language nests. Preschool, people bring out preschoolers in the language, looked after by adults who are fluent in the language, and from there, kura Māori primary schools and secondary schools and even tertiary education has developed, and so you can do all your education now in Te Reo Māori if you so desire.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what got you passionate about the language itself in terms of learning and teaching it?
Well, it started early because my father and my aunties and uncles, my elders, they all spoke the language, and I didn't speak very much at the time, so I always wanted to know what they were saying.
Yep.
And my father instilled a passion in the language for me. When I went to college, I wasn't the school that I went to, high school that I went to, didn't offer Māori as a subject, so my mother, who was a teacher, came in and she reminded the principal that it was a legal requirement. If the school didn't offer the language itself, if they didn't have a teacher, then we were legally entitled to take the language through the correspondence school. So that's what I did, and then went through university, and a Māori university that was setting up at the time, that was running immersion courses, so week-long immersion courses at Te Wānanga o Raukawa, where we spent the whole week in speaking only Māori, which was amazing. Those courses are still run around the country by different organisations.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I could go on with like a whole bunch of more questions around that, but I'll try to keep it towards the mobile stuff that we'll talk about.
Sure.
So yeah, you're working on some pretty exciting projects. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. We've got 3 apps that have just gone live in the last week. There's one is called Moko Moko. Another one is Tieke. And then the third one is He Waitekai. and they're funded by the Ministry of Education for Māori medium schools, and they are really the first set of apps that are available for children in Māori medium education.
Awesome. And now I'm kind of skipping ahead, but the funding bit in particular, how did you go about getting that?
Well, the ministry, it really goes, it's a long story. The 1970s probably, when some radical university students and others got together and started to pressure the government and say this is, actually we have a treaty that was signed back in 1840 that promised us the rights over all our precious belongings. And so a case was taken to court, and it actually went through to the Privy Council in London, and the Privy Council agreed with the group that took the case. It was the group was called Ngā Kai Whakapūmau o Te Reo. They took the case, and the Privy Council agreed that yes, the New Zealand government the Crown was liable to protect the language. So that meant that set in progress a whole lot of acts of Parliament. One of them was the Māori Language Act, and one of the fruits of the Māori Language Act of 1987 was the establishment of an organisation called Te Taura Whiri Te Reo Māori, the Māori Language Commission, and also funding was set aside, government funding was set aside to produce resources for Māori education and for the production of resources to feed into schools and early childhood, the kohanga reo that were already established at the time. So that funding has been ongoing now since for some years now, and there's a group of us who there are a number of organisations who tender for the funding, and in this particular case, I was lucky. I got together with another group of people. Kōrero ki ngā Kararehe is the name of that group.
Wow.
Robert Powhare and Gary Tatham, and they were already in progress. They'd already started producing these apps. They had some great ideas, and so we got together and produced the 3 apps with some other organisations, some animators, and some resources for the teachers to help the teachers use them in class. We trialled them with groups of students from school, from different schools, and yeah, we went live this week.
Awesome. And what do you think helped you to secure that funding, against all the others who applied?
I've got a bit of a background in publishing. I've produced some resources for the Ministry of Education before. I've produced some books myself, and I think it's a bit of it's been a bit of an honour. Apparently, we have a mutual respect for each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess partnering with people who maybe carry a name or have a reputation like yourself would definitely help.
Definitely.
So
yes.
So I think it usually is about the trust factor, right? Whoever they're going to give the funding to, they got to be able to trust that the job will get done. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think there have been mistakes made in the past, so everybody's tightened up the way they've operated, and once you establish that you're going to produce something that's worthwhile, then things go from there, progress from there.
Okay, cool, wonderful. That's usually a common question asked for folks who are looking to get any of this work done. It's always the funding. How do I get my funding, or where do I go for funding, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, before I move on to any of the other questions, is there anything you think that would be valuable for others to know about in terms of that funding process?
It's like going for any grants. I think it's something, or grants or funding. I think there's a process that you have to learn. it's like sitting an exam or playing a sport. You learn the rules, you play to the rules, and if you don't know how, you get a coach. You get someone who's done it before to show you how to do it better, and just keep trying.
Awesome. Sage advice. And now I remember you saying that you're currently studying as well, on top of everything else. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep, I'm doing a PhD at the moment in first language, bilingual first language acquisition. So I have a granddaughter. She's just turned 3, and I've been following her language acquisition from birth. She speaks mainly Māori at the moment. She is going to be bilingual because we have the environment here in Aotearoa is such that English is predominant. And I have every faith that she's going to pick up English. In fact, I don't just have faith; I can actually see it happening.
No.
Both in the study that I'm doing and as she develops her language every day. But yes, it's just absolutely fascinating watching her learn, and wonderful that if I can feed something back into the movement, into the kaupapa of language revitalisation in Aotearoa, yeah, I'll be happy with that.
Awesome. So is that why you decided to pursue a PhD to support, obviously, the language work?
Yes, it's a passion that I've got. We haven't much of the knowledge, the academic knowledge that's known in the world today, is fed by or has been informed at some stage by the studies of language acquisition of children, and most of those studies have been of white, middle class, well-educated, Euro-American children, monolingual children learning English. So there are studies; those studies are starting to diversify now. Well, not starting, but there are more studies and more broad studies of different languages now. But as yet, there haven't been any done in any of the oceanic languages. There's been one or two. There's been one study. It's quite old now in Samoa, but again, nobody's followed a child from birth. So if we know a little bit more about our own language and how our children are learning language naturally, then that can feed into all sorts of things, like how we teach adults the language, in later life, because there's still a lot of people who would like to learn Māori but didn't have the opportunity when they were younger.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I'm glad you told me about that, because I don't think we went over that bit at Palima. Now, after also, I don't know if you managed to see that talk at Palima in regards to IP. Were you present for any of the talks around IP?
I'm not sure that I was, but yeah, it's something that's really important.
Yes. So, essentially, the question is, how do you tackle IP for your content?
Carefully. It's fraught. At the moment we have a situation in New Zealand where the biggest organisation, it's been a state-owned enterprise for some time, and before that it was part of the government, and they've just gone under.
Whoa!
So they have IP. They have a backlist of books and resources that go back for decades, and they include really important resources. So that we're one of the issues that we're thinking about now is what's going to happen to that IP. So, and there are other resources which have been submitted by different tribal groups, and so that IP is old IP, but it belongs to those tribal groups, and only in a very few cases has that been protected. So more recently, the government has allowed for, the Ministry of Education has allowed for iwi groups, tribal groups, to keep the IP of certain resources, but that's only been probably in the last maybe 15 years at the very longest. It's really important to talk with people when you're dealing with stories that are older stories, traditional stories, traditional knowledge, traditional artwork, to talk with the people who have some sort of vested interest in those, because there are so many cases now where that the images and information has ended up just open for misappropriation.
Yep. And who ends up owning the IP? Like, is it a family, a group, an individual that represents the group? Are you aware of how that's actually, tackled?
There's been one very high-profile case here in New Zealand. Are you familiar with the haka?
Yeah.
The All Black haka or I should say, the haka that the All Blacks had historically done.
Yep.
There was a case taken to the Waitangi Tribunal by an iwi group who wanted to establish that in fact it belonged to a tupuna of theirs and an ancestor of theirs, and therefore they were entitled to the IP over that. And the primary motivation for that was that they wanted to protect it. That the haka has ended, the words and images of the haka have ended up on things that are culturally inappropriate in the past, like tea towels. And some high-profile multinational corporations have used images of the haka in promotional material. And then there have been just people who are naive or ignorant about the haka and what it's for, and who it belongs to and the purpose of it, are using it in advertising and in promoting their own groups, singing groups and the like.
So is the issue more for, say, the larger organizations or corporations who are then using it as a means to sell their own stuff? Because, like, for example, Facebook and social media and sharing, like, stuff goes out all the time. So,
sure.
How's it tackled for those two distinct areas, What is the actual ownership for?
Yeah, we're getting more savvy about it. So in the past, things were open. We've shared. That's the sort of that's part of our culture, is to share.
Yep.
But once we see things being used inappropriately and see things being rubbish, treated as if it's not important, then that's when we put our foot down and said that it's about time that we want a bit more control over things. So with the resources that I've done, those issues haven't really come up. I try and keep the intellectual property and copyright with the people who do artworks and things like that as much as possible. But some of the resources, the information, the stories are commissioned by the education, so anything has to be negotiated with them as well.
So would you say that all the I guess the protocols as well, does that sometimes get in the way of actually making stuff, or do you think it's just a necessary hoop to jump through in order to?
I think it's really important that we go through those processes and make sure that everybody's happy and that we're not. It keeps us safe. It keeps our intellectual property safe. It keeps our wider cultural property safe. Because we all feel bad when we see something on TV that's, say, images of the haka that we know are an attempt to belittle us.
Yeah. I think also in the United States there was a case that opened up about an American football team, the Redskins, and how they're trying to, I think, change the name of that team from Redskins because, obviously they find that quite racist, to say the least. Interesting. Okay, I always try to focus. I could go on with a lot more questions around that, but thank you for sharing that. I think it is important to also see how different groups are tackling it in different parts of the world as well.